Good morning, good day, and good evening. I'm, as always, your host, Brody Robertson. I have zero idea what episode this is. It's probably like 224, something like that. That sounds close enough to right. Today, we have Ritchie, Acidiclight, back on the show. Welcome back. How's it going?
It is going quite alright, other than, well, the massive storm going on right now.
Yeah, and the mic technical issues we were just having, but, you know.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on there. I don't know if it's USB or Discord, or hell, it could even be Pipewire, or maybe my computer hates me.
Yeah, it's probably a mix of all of the above, actually. Like, to be honest, I did notice that moving the mic closer to you did make it work slightly better. I know even with the noise suppression set to none, Discord does still have some compression going on in the background, and I think they still do a bit of noise suppression, even with it disabled. So, yeah. I could just use Jitsi for stuff, and Jitsi doesn't seem to have these sorts of problems.
Yeah, but then I have no idea how to use it, so...
Yeah, that's fair. So, for anyone who didn't see the last episode that you were on, just give a brief introduction of who you are and what you do. Because also, that's changed since the last time you were here as well.
So, my name's Michael, even though everyone calls me Ritchie. And I am a C# game developer. I'm also very blind. That's kind of my thing. And in the last episode, I was the lead programmer of Restitch, so that's what a lot of people might know me as. But since then, I've actually left Trixel, and I'm doing my own stuff now. I've been bug hunting KDE, working on my own game. I actually have multiple games on the back burner nowadays. And since the whole Restitch stuff, I am now a full-time Linux user.
Well, you did, I think after the last episode we had, I don't know how long it was after that, you did switch back to Windows temporarily, I believe?
Yeah, I had to go back to Windows 11 because shortly after the podcast, I switched to Plasma Wayland because Plasma 6 was in RC, and I had gotten my Zoom multi-monitor thing fixed and merged into master, and I wanted to use that. But one day I was working on Restitched, and I loaded into a level that someone was having issues with, and I went to debug it for them. But for whatever reason, the entire sky was just flickering black and white, and models were glitching out. Everything was just completely chaotic. And after a bunch of testing, what I realized is the more objects were on screen in Unity, the worse it got. And obviously, we're talking in terms of like an empty level being fine, and then you place 3 down apples, or you place down 3 apples, and the game goes haywire. And
right.
That was on Plasma Wayland with my AMD 7600 XT, and I switched to Xorg because I thought maybe it was like X Wayland or something like that, because Unity editor doesn't run under Wayland natively, at least not 2020 LTS, which is what we use. Right. What I still use. But Xorg didn't fix it. No surprise there. And it turned out to be a driver issue. A driver issue. And switching back to Windows just fixed it. And then obviously, I ended up quitting Trixel because reasons. But once I did, I went back to Linux, and I haven't been able to test any larger scale Unity games yet, but I used a different driver. I'm on RADV instead of AMD VLK. Or Vulkan Radiant, I believe, is what I'm using for my Vulkan driver, and that seems to have made not just Unity, but my entire system way more stable. So I've been able to basically not use Windows anymore.
Regarding the whole Wayland support in Unity, it looks like as of the 2023 version, there is experimental support.
Yeah. I haven't tried the 2023 version yet because I don't think the LTS of it. Actually, yeah, the LTS wasn't out yet because
Right.
it's still not out. They're actually not doing 2023 LTS. It's all changed.
Mhm.
Now it is Unity 6000.0.4, which is actually Unity 6 preview, and it's
Okay.
super confusing. And I tried it, and it was a buggy mess and socially distant. So I went back to 2021 LTS, where I know things work.
Right, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I guess if you are building a game over a long length of time, it probably makes a lot more sense to stick back with like a known working version rather than using something which, might possibly be better, but hasn't really hit that point of maturity yet.
Yeah. Sometimes I do like to do the engine upgrades, typically with like new LTS builds of the same year, because they do have bug fixes, obviously.
Sure.
They don't fix many of the bugs that I actually care about, but a bug fix is a bug fix.
Right.
But sometimes I do like to upgrade to actual newer year versions of Unity, and Unity 6 in particular, because I don't know how well you know about the whole runtime fee thing that happened, but part of what happened with that is when they walked that back, they actually, it's kind of a way to win back a lot of the trust of people like me who are on the personal edition. They actually took away the annoying made with Unity splash screen that you're forced to have, and they increased the maximum amount of revenue you're allowed to make per year before you have to go to Unity Pro, and then it just completely dropped Unity Plus. And the way Unity licensing works is, at least historically, the license you agree to doesn't change unless you upgrade your engine version to a new year. So I'm on the 2021 LTS license for personal, so I'm stuck with the splash screen and all that stuff. But when I go to Unity 6, it's going to be a new license, and I'm going to be able to turn it off and make my own, because I don't mind showing off that my game's made in Unity, but I'd rather show it off in my own art style.
Right.
I'd rather not just have it be a splash screen that's just shoehorned in.
Every single Unity game that is using that version just has that exact same splash screen.
Yeah.
So, I think, from my understanding, like the way they changed it is fairly similar now to the way that Unreal works, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with the new versioning scheme. I'm also not a fan of it, because right now it's kind of in this weird transitional period where if you go to download Unity from Download Archive, it shows up as 6,000, and then none of the other numbers make sense. Like, what does 0 mean? Because 1 used to mean like the beta channel, and then 2 was your regular kind of testing / preview channel, and then 3 was LTS. It was logical. And then it was basically reverse car model. So Unity 2021 LTS came out in 2022. Really simple, but now it's just a mess right now, and it's confusing. And yeah.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay, so 2023. Okay, yeah, 2023 used the old numbering scheme. Now it's 6,000. So we have 6,000.02, 6,000.01. And then 6,000.00. Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
And it's really confusing because that happened like a couple weeks ago, and when I last checked that page, it was still 2023, and it's like, what the hell is going on over there?
Right. I see the issue then. So, I know it's like really old news now, but what was that like when the whole Unity stuff came out? Because back then, you were at Trixel already, yeah?
Yeah. Trixel, we were a little bothered by it just because everyone was bothered by it.
Sure.
But we were just like, yeah, we're gonna weather the storm. This game's a Unity game. It's been a Unity game for years. There's no point in porting it to another engine.
Right.
But with Socially Distant, I was like, I could probably port this in a week. Let's find another game engine. because I was very against it. I was very against the idea of being charged per install, because you know what's going to happen there.
Yeah, troll
Someone's
installs,
going to
yeah.
pirate your game, or someone's going to like troll you if they hate you, and they'll install it, then delete it, then install it, then delete it, or they have
Yeah,
like 50 computers.
Who cares
and it's
about
like,
review bombing when you have install bombing?
yeah, and it's not something I wanted to deal with. And then I was like, I don't know how that's going to work for me. Obviously, it's still an issue, and they have walked a lot of it back since then. But it's a lot better to grasp now than it was at first. They totally dropped the ball at first, but it's they got rid of the whole multi-install thing. They clarified that it's the first install on a device that you pay for, that you pay the fee on, and obviously they kind of changed the whole revenue structure of it's royalty based, and also there's the install fee if you hit a certain threshold, and then they dropped Unity Plus. They increased the threshold for personal. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better now, and I just decided to stick with Unity because I know Unity well, and like Trixel, my game's been in Unity for years. I can do a port in like a reasonable amount of time, but I would need to learn a new game engine, and with me and my blindness, it's easier for me to bite the bullet and stay with Unity. Right. Yeah. Like, I tried Godot and I tried Unreal. I did try another game engine and actually managed to find some bugs in that one. It was called Flax. It's kind of like
Flax?
Unity. It's a lesser known one, but it's an in-development game engine. It has a very similar interface to Unity and how you use it, but it's all open source, and I found a lot of bugs in it that have been fixed, thankfully. But and I just ended up going back to Unity because, yeah.
Right. So, of the engines you did try, did you find one that you actually would have been happy to port the game to, or was it just like, yeah, Unity sucks right now, but I guess let's just see where this goes because nothing's any better? Like, they're better without having the runtime fee, obviously, but not better in terms of what they offer and the tech they have.
Yeah, it's a bit of both. Godot was no, I don't like Shady script. There is the .NET version of it. I'm a C# developer. I always will be. It's not going to change. But the .NET tooling is not quite there, or at least it wasn't when I tried. And Godot, its editor UI does this really weird thing. It kind of DPI scales on its own. And that doesn't sound like a problem, but for me, the most important thing is that my font size is consistent across applications. If I zoom in 2,000%, and if you think that's overkill, well, you don't know me well. 2,000% in Discord, it should look the same as zooming in 2,000% to my game engine. It should be just as readable. And unfortunately, Godot, the font was huge when I'd zoom in that much. And it was like, I'd have to zoom out of Godot to be able to fit things on screen. And then when I switch back to my code editor, I'd have to zoom back in to read my code. And it's like, I don't want to do that.
Yep.
Then there was Unreal. Unreal was nice. I love its UI toolkit. I've been using Unreal off and on since Unreal 4.7, so it's been like at least a decade. And I love Unreal's UI editor because it's very drag and drop. There's like built-in support for animation and tweening, and it's got a lot of layout elements. Like it almost feels like using something like GTK or Qt in how you put UIs together, and it's fully visual, which sounds counterproductive when I'm blind, but I have my ways. Whereas Unity is very hacked together and very difficult to use effectively. The problem with Unreal, though, is I could put a great UI together, sure, but I'd build the game, and it would be like 300 to 600 megabytes in size for what's basically like, I don't know, a wallpaper,
right,
and a panel and a terminal. Like, I didn't do a full port. There wasn't a lot of stuff in the game, And then I started comparing engines, and in all three of the engines that I tried, Unity, Unreal, and Flaps, I put nothing in the game build. Just a black scene, nothing else. And I hit build. And Unreal was still like borderlining 150 megs with just a black screen.
Is that the Unreal boilerplate there, or is that something you would expect to expand as you build more onto the game?
I was mostly just testing boilerplate, yeah. So obviously you have all of your libraries and dependencies to make the game engine be a game engine, but then there's other kinds of data like scene data and stuff like that. And just the way things get packed in Unreal, it results in a larger build with a black screen than in something like Unity, which is weird. I don't know why, but I guess it is what it is. And then obviously I was also switching between Windows and Linux back then. I think back then I was doing like the QEMU setup with Windows and a virtual machine on another GPU. Unreal on Linux is a pain in the ass. Anyone who has had to use Unreal on Linux knows that. You have to compile it from source. And it is like
Wait, really?
on most computers, it is worse than compiling the kernel. It's going to take 6 hours, and you need a lot of RAM to do it. And with Unreal 5, what you end up is a completely unreadable mess because the font scaling is fucked. And then, for whatever reason, I got some weird compile error because like Visual Studio was missing on Linux. And Unreal is C++, so like you need your tool chain working, otherwise your game is not going to build and you're not going to get an editor. It's not like Unity where you can go in and there are compiler errors, but you can still drag things around and like test things. Unreal, if you have compile errors in C++, you're fucked.
So when all this was going down, how much work had been done on Socially Distant? How far were you into the development? Because obviously, you know, if you're at like the prototype stage, it'd be a lot easier to do a port than say where you are now, where a lot more of the functionality is coming together.
At that point, I was very, very early on in gameplay. I don't think I had really any gameplay. Like maybe the social media system was in place in like a very early, you have to use dev tools to use it kind of way. At that point, I was just making a desktop environment for the game to live in, because it is a hacking game, and it does take place in a desktop, so you need to put that desktop together so you can actually, you know, have a game, or have something for the game to live in. So back then, it was really easy for me to drop everything and go to another engine and see what I could do with it. But nowadays, I wouldn't do that, because I have a lot more tooling. It is actually becoming a game and not just a desktop environment. And it's very entrenched into Unity. There's like no way I'm going to port it.
So why did that bring you back to Linux after the whole thing's breaking?
Honestly, Microsoft and Xavier Hugel. Microsoft, because they're starting to do more AI crap, and they're starting to lock down Microsoft or local account creation. Now you have to like basically set it up as a work or school device and then not join a domain. That is the only way you can create a local account. And it's like, I don't need a Microsoft account. I don't need OneDrive. I don't need Office 365. I do have a perpetual license of Office 2021, but I rarely use it. And that's something I can throw in a virtual machine if I need to. Or maybe even bottles if that gets good enough with wine. I don't see that happening with Office 2021 though. But Windows, even with that all aside, it wasn't a great experience. It did fix my driver issue, but there were a bunch of other driver issues. For the first 2 weeks or so when I was back on Windows, I did not have a graphics driver because for whatever reason, the AMD Adrenalin software is 404'd. And when I tried to install it after it stopped 404'ing, I'd get Windows Defender errors and driver signature verification errors. It was really stupid. And then Windows Update would pull in a driver for it. And it would blue screen like constantly. And Chrome would crash, Discord would crash, everything was just crashing.
I'm looking at a guide on Tom's Hardware right now about making a local account on setup. this is as of February, so it might have changed by now. But what they're suggesting in here is that when you're going through the setup process, you get to the choose a country screen. You press Shift F10 to bring up a command prompt and disable the internet connection.
Yeah.
And
Once you're fucking around with the command prompt in the install environment, you've hit the deep end. Like, I don't want to do that.
yeah, then you use ipconfig release to disable the interface. Then you close. Wait, what? Wait. Why would you have to? Couldn't you just unplug your Ethernet cable at that point? What does it? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Or does it behave differently when there's no connection and when it thinks there's no network device? It probably does. You know what? It probably does. I wouldn't put it past Microsoft.
It's really convoluted. I know my usual method is to just say, or in the email prompt for the Microsoft account, I say something like fuckatU.com and then put ASDF as the password.
Mm-hmm.
And then that kind of like, it realizes this is not a valid account, and then it goes, oops, there's an error.
Mm-hmm.
And then they left in a little button that says try again, and you do it again, and then it comes up with a local account prompt, and then you go from there. But they've taken that away. They've patched it in 24.82, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's come out yet, but that's at the very least it's an insider preview, and yeah. So I don't want to be part of that. I paid for Pro for local accounts.
Do you know if they care about temporary email addresses? Because I know there's a lot of services that like make these burner addresses that just go nowhere.
I honestly don't know, and to be honest, I'm happy with Linux, so I don't care enough to check. Because Linux is easy. You want a local account, you create an account.
Honestly, it's harder to not have a local account. Like, there's so few distros that offer anything else.
And even on Arch, it's easy. It's like 2 commands.
Yeah.
You add the user, you add the wheel group alongside it, and then you do your sudo stuff or whatever you're going to do. And then password, and then your username. And then you enter your password. And then, boom, you're done. It's 2 commands.
Like, I get them wanting to integrate a lot of this functionality they're talking about, but, like, why do I need an online account? Just let me have a local account. Like,
yeah, like it's good if you want it that it's there, but why do I need it if I don't need it? Like, why do I need to use OneDrive if I have my own Nextcloud instance or Google Drive even? Like, why do I need AI if I can write code at a level where I don't need AI? Or when I do need AI, I can just open my web browser and go to ChatGPT. It's not that hard. I don't need a button in my taskbar for it.
Speaking of, go on. I do want to bring up something else in a second.
All right.
Oh no, this is going to be related to the AI stuff. If there was anything else you wanted to say there.
But yeah, like I was saying, I don't want to have these like forced upon me features that I'm not going to use because they're taking up RAM, they're taking up space on my screen. In some cases, when they add things, settings get reverted. There used to be this issue where I would turn off the search bar in Windows 10. And then I'd upgrade to Windows 11 and it would get reverted because there's like different ways of doing it. And the thing that annoys me the most about Windows is all the ads and the forced stuff that it tries to push on you would be totally fine because it's a proprietary operating system and that's how they make their money. If my paid license for Windows 11 Pro just disabled it. Like, if you're not going to pay for Windows, you're going to pay for Windows through advertisements and shit. But if you're going to pay for Windows through actual money, you shouldn't be forced into that crap. I shouldn't have stuff forcibly installed on my system. I shouldn't be forced into a Microsoft account. I shouldn't be locked out of my system just because my Ethernet isn't plugged in. None of that needs to happen. The only reason it happens is because Microsoft wants it to. And I just don't like having that level of control on my system being dictated by a company that is not mine.
Speaking about that level of control, this is the thing I wanted to bring up. Did you hear about the Windows recall stuff yet? This is their new fun AI thing they've got going on.
Oh, is it the one that records the entire screen and everything?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Yeah, I saw that on Mastodon. I didn't remember the name of it, so I need to double take for a sec. But yeah,
Okay,
I did see that, and I'm like, I am glad I'm on KDE.
So this is going to be old news by the time this comes out, but let me just explain to anyone who hasn't heard about Recall yet. So this is a system that Microsoft is selling as like big crazy new feature that you're going to love. What it basically does is, as you're using your system, it'll be taking screenshots of everything you are doing. And then all of this data is going to be processed through a machine learning system, and you'll be able to use a search engine, basically, to search for elements through anywhere in your computing history. So one example they showed is the person who was demoing it opened up a PDF file, and it didn't say this text anywhere in the PDF, but she searched for brown leather bag, and it took her to the picture of the brown leather bag. So it recognized the image there, and you could use, machine learning nonsense to find that content. Now, Microsoft says that all of the processing for this is going to be done locally.
Sure it is.
How often has Microsoft said that we don't collect this data? Remember when they first started doing all the massive data collection back in Windows 8 and Windows 10, and they were like constantly saying like, nope, we're not doing this, nope, not happening, nope, we're not collecting all of this data. I don't trust Microsoft to say they're doing something locally when they have the history of being Microsoft. This data is going to be scooped. It's either going to be like an opt-out toggle somewhere, or it'll be opt-in by default, and then some update later they swap it from opt-in to opt-out, and it's just like, whoop, sending up as training data. Most people have no idea what training data means. So like, okay, have the data. Also, do you want to know the most fun part about it?
What?
I'm gonna find. Give me a second. Let me just find the specific text from their documentation. About what they do not hide from the collection. Note that Recall does not perform content moderation. It will not hide information such as passwords or financial account numbers. That data may be in snapshots that are stored on your device, especially when sites do not follow standard internet protocols like cloaking and password entry. So if you ever do that thing, you know how a lot of websites have that little toggle where you can like show your password? If you ever do that, your password is going to be saved basically in plain text just on your computer.
Yeah, because Windows is totally the operating system we want that happening on. Like, you don't put all the whole, like, this is spyware, because it is spyware.
It is spyware, yes.
Put that aside for a second. It's Windows. The most popular desktop operating system in the world right now, still. And the same operating system that all the malware are developers, I almost said artists. That would have been funny in the 90s.
They're basically artists.
All the malware developers target. And, we have all these info stealers. That's going to be a gold mine, especially if the AI is running locally.
Yeah, well, with it running locally, so let's say you have some sort of malware, right, that prompts the... Let's just assume that Microsoft isn't collecting any data. You have a bit of malware that will send prompts to the model, and it's like, okay, give me password fields, and then just collects whatever data it is and sends it off to whoever. Like, what's to stop that?
Yeah. Absolutely nothing. And I'm very, very into cybersecurity. Like this, that's what I'm into. I'm actually planning on going into computer networking for college in a year or so, whenever I stop having to go to so many eye appointments. Because game dev is something I do as a form of art and creative outlet, but I'm really into cybersecurity. And when I read this stuff, and hear about it, the first thing I think about is, well, I'm a black hat malware developer. How can I take advantage of it? And if the AI is running locally and storing stuff locally, I'm gonna be able to find where it's being stored, and eventually I'm gonna break through whatever encryption, if any. And
if any.
I doubt there's gonna be any, realistically. And I'm gonna look through it, and maybe I might do some like big data analysis on whatever's stored in it, however it's stored. But eventually I'm going to find passwords, and I'm going to immediately send them off to some C2 server, and boom, you're pwned. And all because Microsoft thought it was a good idea to put spyware on your computer.
Well,
and
let's not even talk about the password stuff. If you ever use an encrypted chat application on Windows now, all of those messages, pwned. Every single one of them. Encryption is dead on Windows.
Yeah, it doesn't fucking matter if they're end-to-end encrypted if there's a screenshot of them right on the device and there's OCR in it going on. As soon as it's rendered on the screen, you're screwed. And thinking about me for a second, if I were still on Trixel, I would not be able to use Windows, because what else would be on my screen that it would be tagging and reading?
I didn't even think
the source code of Restitch, which I signed a contract that says I'm not allowed to share.
Yeah, I didn't even
my
think
computer's
of that.
sharing it.
If you're using like Windows in some sort of I don't know, let's make it super serious, like some sort of military context, for example. Like, that might be top secret information.
Yeah. It might be information that if leaked, they'd make you disappear. But, it's Microsoft thinking. Like, I'm totally flabbergasted by it, and I'm glad that I got Linux working. I really am.
How long do you think it's going to take for some 3-letter agency to come to Microsoft and say, we want the information from someone's computer, and see exactly what they're doing?
I'd have to wait for about 2 femtoseconds.
Yeah, if you're doing anything, just don't use Windows, but if you're doing anything even remotely sus, just Windows is not suitable. Now, there's going to be a toggle to turn it off, absolutely. I don't trust...
But will it do anything?
Well, not even that. Let's assume it does. I don't trust Microsoft to not change the toggle after an update.
That too. And that's if it even does anything.
Yeah. I think this might actually be the worst spying that Microsoft has ever done. Like, we can talk about the whole, advertising collection, tracking where your cursor is on the screen. Like, yeah, all that stuff is fine, but having a system that effectively breaks all encryption, I think that's by far the worst. And I don't want to say it can't get worse than this, but I can't think of how it can be worse than this.
Me neither, but I know absolutely it's gonna get worse, because we said it can't get any worse than this with Windows 10, and look where we are.
Now, I'm not opposed to the idea of doing a system like this, right? If you know you have complete control of the data, I think this is a cool idea. I just don't trust Microsoft with that data. Like, if you wanted to run something on, like, a local server, for example, that you knew exactly what was running on it, like, that's fine.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's cool. It might not be the thing I want to use, but I think that is a cool bit of tech.
I just want to make sure I know where that data's going.
Yeah. I don't know if there's a company I would trust with that data, but I can think of companies I would trust more than Microsoft.
Yeah, me too. I might trust KDE with it. I might trust
Maybe.
Nextcloud with it, but not Microsoft. No way.
Oh, God. I don't know, like, people, whenever things like this happen, right, people talk about how there's going to be, like, this big rush of people to Linux, and there will be, but Oh, there'll be like a couple of people, but most people, like, this is the sad thing, right? Most people don't know this is happening, or if they did see it, like, this announcement, don't care. Like, this was so annoying when I was watching this. I was watching a streamer talk about this happening, and he didn't understand at all what was going on with this. And was like, well, this isn't any worse than, like, browser cookies or, like, a browser history. It's like, no, it's so much worse. This is every single thing on your computer being collected and and easily searched through with an AI model. Like, it's so much more than that.
Yeah. And as far as people switching to Linux, I always kind of sigh when people say that there's going to be huge exodus from Windows to Linux. You can hope that, and one can hope that it'll happen, but realistically, it's not going to happen. Because most people don't care. Most people use Windows because they grew up on Windows, and it's like the operating system they use. It's their computer. Most people who are even annoyed at Windows won't even like, they'll think of Linux as this really complicated thing, and unfortunately they're right, because Linux as a whole is, I'll be honest, a massive mess, and there's a lot of things that could be done better about it. We have way too many distros, which is in itself is confusing, because how do you recommend a distro to someone who doesn't know what Linux is? We can't just throw them on Ubuntu because you don't know what they're going to be doing with that distro, and if Ubuntu is going to work for them, or if that layout is going to work for them. There's so many desktop environments, which is great if you like messing with desktop environments and seeing what you can do with them, but most people just want to open their computer and have their computer work. And then most people rely on software that just does not exist on Linux yet. Most people have hardware that don't work on Linux. I myself have a headset that, until very recently, because I actually programmed the driver for it, I could not use one of the main features on it that I use on Linux. It was a Windows-only feature. And people are going to stay with Windows because Windows works for them, no matter how bad it is getting in terms of being spyware. And it's unfortunate, but that's the reality of it. Nobody's going to jump ship. A few people might, like people like me, the power users might, but most people are just not going to switch.
Well, I think when it comes to Windows as well, obviously you have those power users who, you know, maybe they've built a computer, maybe they at least understand, like, you know, general techie things. But I think a lot of people forget that most computer users don't upgrade operating systems, they upgrade computers. The only reason people aren't still using Windows 8 is because Microsoft added a little button that says upgrade to Windows 10. Before that, people didn't really upgrade operating systems. They would upgrade whenever their computer broke and they bought a new one.
Yeah, and for the people who did upgrade their operating system without replacing the entire computer, back then, and I remember this distinctly with Windows 8, it was never, oh my god, Windows 8 is horrible, I'm going to go to Linux. It was always, oh my god, Windows 8 is horrible, I'm going to stay with Windows 7.
Yep.
And that even happens nowadays. People who hate Windows 11 are just going to stay on Windows 10. And that goes out of support. I don't think they're going to care.
It's so sad to me, because I guess Windows 10's been around for quite a while now, but I will see posts that remind me of those Windows 7 posts and those Windows XP posts. People will say Windows 10 is the last good version of Windows. I remember when Windows 10 came out and everyone was like, look at all this spyware, like look at all the stuff they're changing, look at how much worse they're making it. And now there are people who their first version of Windows was Windows 10 and are like, Windows 10 is the last good version. Like, you weren't born when 7 or XP came out. What are you talking about?
And I was born when XP came out, and even I don't really think Windows XP is...
XP is just
great.
Nostalgia. XP was not good. It
I would
was
not
good by,
downgrade to that.
by like Service Pack 3. It was, they fixed everything, but at the start, XP was like that was the swap to full NT. That was when they completely stopped doing the whole DOS Windows thing. And they'd done NT Windows before, but it still was kind of rough at the beginning. By the time the service packs came out, then it actually got good, and that's what people remember as Windows XP.
Yeah, people remember XP like SP2 and SP3. Was there an SP3? I can't remember.
Maybe it is SP2.
I think it was SP3. Either way, it doesn't matter. People don't remember Windows XP RTM, because if you do remember RTM, it came with no firewall on by default. And back then, the internet was still fairly new, and it was very common for people to connect their system directly to the internet without a router in between or a hardware firewall. And someone actually did a video recently about Windows XP being connected directly to the internet, and they kind of replicated that old kind of setup where you're directly wired into the internet with nothing between you and the computer.
Do you happen to know what that video was called?
I can't remember what it was called, unfortunately. It was one of the ones that just auto-played for me. But he had it hooked up, and within, like, minutes, he had severe malware infections all over the system. There was, like, backdoors and rootkits and an FTP server that he did not put on there. There was even, like, a second user account that managed to get created called Admin A. And he didn't do anything. All he did was just sit there and wait with the computer online, and I would not want to use that in this day and age.
I'm assuming the video you're talking about is what happens if you connect Windows XP to the internet in 2024.
I do believe that is the one.
Okay,
I think it is.
He also did another video 3 days ago for Windows 2000. And it looks like it might have blue screened fairly quickly.
Yeah, I don't doubt that one. And then Windows 7, even if you go back to it nowadays, not that you should, because most computers are not going to run it on bare metal and actually have any drivers. Like, good luck getting USB 3 to work. Like, that's at the level we're at with Windows 7. It is long since dead, unfortunately, because it was my favorite version. But if you were to put Windows 7 in a virtual machine and upgrade it to its latest, up to the 2020 end of support, you're going to have Microsoft Edge and all the spyware on it. It got backported.
I don't know what it is. Like, I really don't get what it is with Windows users who want to use EOL stuff. Like, I get modern Windows really sucks, but I've always thought about this in the context of being a Linux user, right? Like, imagine if you found a Linux user who was like, no, I refuse to update past 1904. Like,
I used to be that user. Oh, man. But it wasn't with 1904, it was with 10.04.
Okay, yeah, at least that's an LTS. Did they do LTSs back then?
Yes, 10.04 or 10.04.4 LTS, Lucid Linux.
Okay.
It was the last LTS to have GNOME 2, and that was why I stuck with it. But
right.
With that said, I do kind of understand the people who do stay on older Windows versions. For most people, it's because they don't like the new stuff, and their system works. And to them, no matter how many or how hard you try to urge them to upgrade for security reasons, they don't care. Because they just think, well, my computer's fine. I have an antivirus. It works fine. I don't get viruses. I don't do bad things on the internet. I don't click the big green download button. My computer's gonna be fine. Why do I need to upgrade? But unfortunately, as time moves on, people stop supporting the older versions of Windows, and by people I mean developers. And your antiviruses don't get updated. Your browser doesn't get updated. And then 20 years later, you end up with, well, what happens if you run Windows XP directly to the internet in 2024? You end up with a shit ton of malware. And you don't even realize it because your antivirus just doesn't know, or it doesn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Like, right now, there is still stuff working on Windows 7, but we are starting to see a lot of things drop support. Like earlier this year, you had Steam that finally dropped support for Windows 7, and that's just the stuff you're hearing about. Like, there'll be these little things that don't change. Like, the point with your antivirus there, like, you might have one, but if it's not running modern antivirus rules, it basically isn't running. Like, that's pretty much how it goes.
Yeah, and if it is running, it's gonna have an outdated database.
Yeah.
For one. Maybe you get lucky and you have some antivirus that does update the database in an unsupported version, but you have to get lucky. Mm-hmm. And most people are not gonna get lucky like that.
If you're treating Windows 7...
Most people don't even use antivirus.
Like, if you're treating Windows 7 as, like, this hobby that you... Like, if you're treating it like a Linux from scratch system, right, where you're spending, like, 8 hours a day trying to make sure everything is perfect about the system, like, you can get it into a state where it's, like, relatively not completely dangerous.
Yeah.
And there is, like, these giant forums where people... Like, there's a bunch of stuff on Reddit as well, where people are, like, really dedicated to keeping Windows 7 alive and keeping it safe. But unless you're doing everything there, like, you're much better off just biting the bullet and moving to something newer. Or if you're on Windows 7, right? Like, I get liking the interface, but if you're on Windows 7 because you want to play video games on Windows 7, at this point, basically everything you want to play is going to work perfectly under Wine anyway. There is a couple of odd exceptions, but those are the odd exceptions.
Yeah. There were a lot more exceptions a few years ago. It's gotten a lot better.
Yeah.
There are some games in my library that actually run functionally better. And I don't just mean for performance sake. I mean actually detecting my video card better on Linux than they do on Windows. Like, if you want to play Bejeweled 2 on Windows, you're software rendering that.
Why are you playing
Bejeweled on Linux, 2? I can hardware accelerate it.
Bejeweled 2, the most important selling point of a computer.
Okay. I mean, I was using that as an example of, like, a really old game that uses direct play and a lot of those older...
What the hell?
Yeah, it came out on PS3, so almost 20 years old.
Jesus
Holy crap.
Christ. Okay, sure. I didn't realize it was that old.
I didn't either. I grew up on Bejeweled. Wow, I feel old now.
Oh, God. So... That's sure. We've gone, like, way off on some, like, random tangent for the past 50 minutes. One thing I did want to talk to you about is I have made a very big deal about client-side and server-side decorations, and I am getting Rygaard on the show as well to talk about his experience from the Factorio side, but I know that you did complain a bit about GNOME doing the whole either client-side stuff as well.
Yeah. So I complain about it from both an accessibility and a game dev standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Actually, before we get into this, sorry, probably should explain what client-side and server-side decorations are for anyone who hasn't heard me rant before. So server-side decorations are basically where your desktop applies window decorations to the window. So window decorations are things like the title bar, the close button, a little icon that says this is what the application is, and things like that. If it's server-side, the desktop is applying this. If it is client-side, then that is up to the application to design itself. Now, client-side does have some benefits. You can integrate things like a menu bar into the header. You can integrate, like, other application components. And if you look at macOS applications, for example, they heavily use client-side decorations, and it works quite well on macOS because, you know, Apple has a much stronger hold on, like, UI design. If you want to be on the App Store, you got to kind of, like, you know, make it fit more with what they're trying to do.
Yeah. Apple way or the highway, basically.
Yeah. Now, the problem is that GNOME only supports client-side decorations and doesn't have server-side as a fallback. If we're looking at something like KDE, though, they allow you to do client-side decorations if you want them, but if you don't add them, every application is just given server-side decorations, and that's fine. So that's why if you open an application on KDE, it's going to have a consistent title bar, whereas on GNOME, yes, some of them, if it's like a GNOME core application, it's going to look fine. But other applications, it's going to depend on how the developer does it. If they use libday core, it'll look GNOME, but if they use something custom, it'll look really weird. And yeah, that's pretty much the landscape.
Yeah. So, my issues with it, from a game dev perspective, and was it Factorio or was it someone else that was complaining about it?
Yeah, they were complaining heavy about it.
Yeah, I'm kind of with them on it. It's hard enough to support Wayland on Linux. It's hard enough to support Linux in general because you have to think about Xorg and Wayland because there's going to be people who run the game on Xorg and under Wayland, and that's just going to happen as long as Xorg is a thing. And yes, X-Wayland is a thing, but sometimes that doesn't exactly work out well. Sometimes it is subtly different and it breaks the game. But that's fine. Whatever. The problem with CSDs in game development is with a game, you're not typically thinking about the game as a window when you're developing it because it's a game. You're given a canvas to render stuff to, and it can have a window border, and a lot of people will play their game in windowed mode, and that's great. Most people will play it in full screen mode. That's also great. And in that case, you won't have a window border, which is fine because you're in full screen mode.
Well,
and you
full screen
that.
or borderless windowed.
Yeah. When I say full screen, I do mean borderless window.
Okay, yeah,
but
fair enough. Yeah.
Even then, you won't have a window border.
Yep.
But in windowed mode, you need some way to reposition the game window so that you can move it onto another monitor or something. Some games let you resize it, most don't. Mine does. And you need a way to close the game. Most games on PC do have an in-game exit button, but sometimes they don't. And, sometimes you need to immediately close it and don't want to navigate to the main menu. You need a way to be able to minimize and maximize it. You need that stuff. And when you're designing a game, you're kind of assuming that the game engine or the operating system is going to do it for you and put that window border in place. Because on Windows, that's going to happen. You tell Win32, I want a window border. It'll give you a window border. You tell it, I don't want it to be resized. It won't let you resize it. Stuff like that. That's great. On KDE, you will get a window border because it has server-side decorations. On macOS even, because Apple has so much of a tight control over that desktop environment, they probably do the same thing as Windows, where you can use a CSD and you'll get the fancy features of a CSD, like being able to put header bars and stuff like that in it, but most of the time you don't need it, and so they probably have server-side decorations for that case, or they have some sort of SDK that puts the client-side decorations in place for you, and it's nice and consistent with the operating system.
Yeah, I can't comment completely on how Apple does it, but
neither can I, honestly. I'm just assuming.
Yeah,
I do have a Mac,
sounds
but
like the way Apple would do it.
But with GNOME, your only option is CSDs. At least to my knowledge. I think that's been a complaint for a very long time, is their lack of support for server-side decorations.
Yeah,
but I honestly don't pay enough attention.
This is the state it's in. There's a protocol for it. This is where it gets really dumb. There's a protocol for it that I believe they might have hacked. They might have been like, yeah, we're good with this, and then never wanted to implement it. Or maybe I'm thinking of DRM leasing, but there is a Wayland protocol that they just, at this stage, refuse to implement.
Yeah. So, with CSDs in game development, when you're working in a game engine like Unity, you kind of have to rely on Unity to do that for you, because you don't have control necessarily over how the game window is created. You have settings that you can set when you're doing the build, but you don't get to like actually call into the Win32 or the Xorg or X11 or any of those APIs that control the game window, because it's done by the game engine. So if I were to implement a CSD into Socially Distant, how would I do it? How would I tell the window manager that I'm dragging the window? How would I tell it to close? I could probably use an in-game game engine API to do it, but then how would I maximize? How would I minimize? How would I tell the window manager what icon to use? And we won't go there with the XDG top level icon thing. We won't go there. But all of these things I have to consider as a developer that maybe my game engine just doesn't have an API for me to do. And I'm not going to be able to reach out to the operating system level APIs, because you just don't do that in a game engine. It's if you do it, it's extremely complicated, and it's not something you want to worry about. So with Socially Distant, what I ended up doing, or what I plan on doing, if I can even figure it out, is I'm going to have a toggle in the settings menu. You go into settings and you go interface, and you turn on, under compatibility, in-game window decorations. And it turns the in-game status bar into a CSD. It's not implemented yet. I'm just planning it. But that's what I'm planning on doing, because I don't know how else to do it in a reliable way. But then someone's going to open the game, not realize that's a setting, and then they don't have a border, and then they're going to file a bug report, and then they're going to be like, what the hell?
Right.
And I don't want to deal with that. And that's something I have to worry about as a game dev. But then there's the accessibility aspect of it for me. And I do use applications, even on KDE, that have CSDs. There's Stream Controller, which is what does my Stream Deck now. And there's a couple flat packs that I use that have CSDs. They give you a lot of power, and that's great. But one of the things I will always assert is that a menu bar, your typical file edit view, stuff like that, is a lot better on PC than a hamburger menu or a sidebar in a lot of cases. Because, and this was a KDE thing, and it's not even related to CSDs, but when I was configuring console, the terminal, the menu bar in the corner, or the main menu thingy, the hamburger menu in the corner, navigating that with a screen magnifier is hell. Because it's a drop down, but the top level menu of that drop down is completely fine to navigate. The sub menus, the moment your mouse leaves the bounding box of the menu, it closes. And there's no way to keep it open.
Okay.
It is hell. And that's annoying for console, but at least I can still close the window and stuff like that in a very common way, and generally navigate the application. And I did actually set it up to use the menu bar, so it's great now. But with an application in the GNOME ecosystem, I'm basically forced to work in a way that is what the developer set up. And if they're using CSDs, then if they're using Leb Decor, then it's probably going to be very GNOME, and it's going to be fine and consistent. That's fine. But if they're using something custom, I'm at their whim. And they could really do some really hanky things. Like Spotify, for example. It has a CSD on Windows, but it doesn't work on KDE. And there's just no way for me to get into my Spotify preferences right now. It's buggy. It's annoying. And it's not accessible. I want my windows to be laid out in a consistent way, controlled by my desktop.
I have not opened up Spotify in a while. Let me just check it. Because I usually just use Spotify on my phone.
Yeah. I use it on PC, and it does get a server-side decoration on KDE.
Yeah, I'm seeing the server-side decoration, yeah.
Yeah. And then there's a big, thick black bar at the top. And that's where the CSD is supposed to go. And that's where you get your preferences and account settings and stuff like that. And it just doesn't render.
Oh.
Yeah.
The hell?
And unfortunately, this is what happens when one desktop environment in the entire ecosystem decides we don't want to support SSDs, and you're on your own to implement CSDs because that's what we're doing and deal with it. You end up with applications that don't quite do it right.
Huh. I don't know if that's... Well, Spotify's Electron application, I believe. I don't know if that's a problem with how Electron does it, or if it's a problem with what Spotify is doing.
I think it's a problem with what Spotify's doing, because they do a custom header bar for Spotify, because I'm very familiar with the layout on Windows. But it's not there on Linux, and it probably is there on GNOME, but I'm not on GNOME.
So the whole CSD SSD thing isn't just a problem in games. It's also a problem in applications using like certain libraries and certain toolkits. Here's a fun one I found a little bit ago. I'll send you the link to it. This is from back in 2021, where people realized that VS Code was broken on GNOME because it just didn't have window decorations. Because at that point, Electron didn't support a fallback on GNOME.
And that's 2021 with VS Code. And they're probably going to be on an up-to-date Electron build. Discord certainly isn't. You know what else doesn't have a proper working CSD that should be there on Windows but isn't on Linux? Discord. And then a number of other Wayland protocols that just don't fucking work on Discord.
I was testing this with someone. Discord, I don't know who at Discord's doing this. Somebody at Discord is like having a bit of fun with Linux, because they half implemented the protocol. If you go into the like screen sharing, it'll show the like all of the things you can capture with Pipewire, and it will actually show it accurately. But when you try to select it, it will error out, and then you like select it again and again and again. It just starts looping. But they've half implemented
I had that the other day.
Yeah. They've half implemented it. I don't know what's happened. I don't know who started this, but somebody's trying to fix it.
Yeah, that was a really frustrating one for me. I had that the other day trying to do a screen share in a voice chat. I would just keep selecting my left monitor. I'd hit apply. I'd have the little thing in KDE to say, save this setting. It would be checked. And it would just keep reopening and keep reopening and keep reopening. I ended up having to literally kill Discord. And switch to Xorg.
Yeah, that's always fun to have to do.
Especially for me, because switching between Wayland and Xorg is not a matter of logging out, selecting a different session, logging back in. I have to actually tell SDDM to auto log in. Like, I don't have a password prompt. I automatically log in to whatever session I have set, because
right, the Zoom SDDM, wouldn't work, would it?
Yeah, there's no compositing in SDDM, so I can't zoom in. So if I have to switch to Xorg, it is literally I have to reconfigure my login manager to use Xorg and then reboot my system.
Right.
It's an ordeal.
If the if the Plasma devs got Zoom working in SDDM, is that the only thing you would need for that to just work fine?
Yeah. I would probably need to refamiliarize myself with the layout.
Sure.
I don't know enough about SDDM, but yeah, if I had the Zoom KDM, the GNOME display manager, it does have Zoom. It does have full compositing.
Right.
Actually, I think it actually uses Mutter while you're in there. And I can go in and switch my session in that login screen, but with SDDM and LightDM and all the other ones, I can't, unfortunately.
I believe you are right about Mutter. SDDM wasn't always the KDE the display manager. They've changed through a couple over the years, so this one is just not core integrated into KDE.
I distinctly remember KDM being one that they had for a while.
That
would have been back in the KDE 4 days. And yes, I have used KDE 4. I don't know how I used KDE 4, but my vision was a lot better when KDE 4 was out.
Yeah, you are right. The KDE display manager, KDM. Yep. I don't know when they swapped. Someone will probably tell me. Yeah, 2014, according to a Phoronix article, they swapped to SDDM. Or they recommended the swap. I don't know if they had started shipping the swap then. Yeah. That's fun. So hopefully at some point they can sort something out there. Like that does seem like a really important thing to get dealt with. Because even if it's not like as much zoom as you need, that still should probably be there.
Yeah, you should at the very least be able to zoom in a little bit to be able to see where to enter your password, because some display manager themes on SDDM, they don't automatically focus in on the password prompt. Whether it be a bug or maybe they're like set up differently to where you actually enter in the username as well. And it's not a great experience. I end up just having to use the default KDE one and don't rice my display manager.
So, can you just explain more about what you were doing to do that logging? Because I don't think I understood what you were doing properly.
So, in KDE, if you go into your system settings, under the appearance, I think, I usually just search for these settings, but there's a category on the side called Login Screen SDDM. And if you go in there, you get your usual, like, customization of the login theme and the background and stuff like that. But if you go up to Behavior, you can actually go in and tell it to log in automatically as a specific user with a specific X session. And it's a little bugged on my system right now. Every time it kind of resets the setting visually. But when you do apply it, what'll end up happening is you reboot your system, and instead of it giving you a password prompt to log into your user, it just automatically goes, okay, I want to log in as Ritchie with Plasma X11. And I'll boot Plasma X11. And for me, that's fine because it's a single user system, and I know that there are not other people using it. But in a multi-user system, obviously you don't want that because you need people to be able to pick their account. And if I were on a multi-user system and I needed to switch between Xorg and Wayland on my session, that just would not be a thing I can do.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Well, at least there's something you can do to work around it. Like that, there's at least that.
Yep.
So
there's always a workaround.
Yeah, you hopefully, hopefully there's something. So right now you're on X11, yes?
Yeah. I am on X11.
Okay. Is that because of the stuff you had happen before with the graphic stuff, and you just haven't tried out Wayland again, or?
No.
Is X11 just fine for you right now? I
started on Wayland when I did my install a couple of weeks ago, I think. I can't remember how long I've been using Linux. It's actually really good that I can't remember how long I've been using Linux this time, because it's getting to a point where my computer is just my computer and I forget that I'm on Linux. Right. That's awesome. But I started out on Wayland because Plasma 6 defaults to Wayland. Plasma 5 defaulted to Xorg.
Right.
And Wayland was great. X-Wayland, not so much. Any X-Wayland application that I use, when I'm zoomed in the screen, I don't know if it's a thing with KWin Zoom or just KWin in general and X-Wayland, but when I hover over a text field, sometimes the cursor just doesn't change to a little I-beam to tell me that there's a text field there. If I hover over a link, it doesn't always turn into a pointing finger. And just these different cursor styles that you have in your applications, they don't work a lot of the time. A lot of the times when it does change, it gets stuck. And it doesn't sound like a big issue, but for me, the cursor is the most prominent thing I can see on my screen. It tells me what I'm hovering over. If I see it turn into that pointing finger, I know that's a clickable link. And that's very accessible to me because I can barely read, but I can still see. But it's even a bigger of a problem in an application that gets busy, like Unity, where when it's recompiling scripts, the main thread is just hung because another thread's doing stuff, and there's a progress dialog. But for me, when I'm zoomed in the screen, I'm not always seeing that progress dialog. So what ended up happening a lot is I'd play socially distant, and I'd do my thing, test things, and I would exit the game. And when you exit the game, it has to reload script assemblies for some reason, and it takes a while. And whenever it loads script assemblies, my cursor turns into a beach ball.
Or a throbber.
Or a throbber, yeah.
I
One of those things.
I fucking hate that term so much.
I went to say beach ball this time because I think I'm on a cursor theme that actually does have a beach ball cursor.
Just for anyone who's unaware of the throbber thing, a throbber is one of the terms used for the loading icon that your cursor will change into. Just in case you haven't seen the Pirate Software short yet.
Yeah. So it'll turn into that loading icon to tell me, yeah, I'm loading script assemblies and stuff like that. But then it will finish, and it will stay a loading icon.
Right.
Because the cursor got stuck. And I don't know about you or anyone listening, but for me, I'm very conditioned from like years and years of computer class. If you see the hourglass or the beach ball or the throbber, you don't touch anything because you're going to overload the computer. And back then that was actually true because we were on like crappy ass Dell Optiplex desktops with like 512 megs of RAM running Windows 7 when they had no business doing so.
I just
Obviously
start smacking
nowadays,
keys just to see if it's going to start working.
but for me, I'm just conditioned not to fuck with things while I see that icon.
That's
so
fair.
I will end up waiting for 5 minutes for the loading icon to go, and then I snap out of it and go, oh wait, it's frozen at that cursor, it's responsive, everything's fine. But that's not great.
Actually, I do have a problem that's very similar to that. I've noticed that sometimes Kdenlive will stop responding, and then, so you know how like applications will usually grey out if they stop responding. Yeah. I've noticed that sometimes when the application is now working again, it remains grey until I click on something in the application.
I can't say I've had that happen, but I've had that happen with Compass a few times.
I've only seen it with Kdenlive, so I don't know if it's an issue just with that application or what the deal is.
Yeah. But speaking of Kwin issues, the other issue that I have with Wayland is it's very specific to me zooming in with multiple monitors. To be clear, multi-monitor zooming in KDE is a lot better, and I know it's a lot better because I wrote the code that makes it a lot better, which is great for me. But there's one remaining bug, and it's been confirmed, they know about it, it's reported, all that stuff. But it's a bug I call heli screens. Because when it happens, it feels like my workspace, all of my screens are heli. Basically, if I have a window like Discord on my left monitor, and we're zoomed out, so picture the screens as normal, because we're normal, you type in it, and everything's responsive. Sure. Then we zoom into the screen, and what's going to end up happening is you're going to have part of Discord on the left monitor, and another part of it on the right monitor. But when zoomed out, it's all on the left monitor. So that's the key info here.
Okay.
And when I type, once the text I'm typing ends up on the right monitor zoomed in, window repaints don't happen immediately on key presses. And I've also had it happen with right-click menus where the highlight won't immediately update across both displays. Sometimes I'll open a right-click menu and part of it will be on my left monitor, but it'll be invisible on the right. And it depends on what monitor, when zoomed out, the window is placed on. So if it were on the right monitor zoomed out, then the exact same lag would be happening on my left monitor. So that's why I call it heli screens, because one screen always updates immediately whenever things happen on it, but the other screens don't, and you get this weird kind of like it feels a lot like screen tearing, but across multiple screens. And it's been a bug. I don't know if it's Kwin 6 or Plasma 6, whatever you want to call it. I don't know if it's been introduced in that, because I've only ever used Kwin Wayland on Plasma 6.
Right.
But I do know it's a Wayland-specific thing, and it just does not happen on Xorg.
So that one that you've reported is not all screens update on window repaint when using zoom effect on Wayland?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Awesome.
That's the one. And I did actually upload screenshots of what it looks like,
Oh, yes.
particularly with right-click menus. A little hard to reproduce it with typing, but you can see how bad it can get.
Okay. Ah, okay. So, That's a weird one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess
I've talked.
So go on.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go on. It's all good.
Okay. I've talked to Xavier Hugel about it, and I've actually looked in the code to see what kind of causes it and what doesn't. What I did notice is that zooming in and out of the screen, it doesn't cause that effect. And looking at the code, I know exactly why. Every time you zoom in, it adds a full repaint to the compositor scene.
That makes sense.
So, what I don't know is how they're doing partial repaints and how that's being calculated. As far as I can tell, they don't account for zoom, and that makes sense because zoom was added way before Wayland was like a thing at all. And zoom is an effect. It's not part of core Kwin. It's not part of the compositor scene rendering. It's literally the way zoom works in KDE is it takes the screen as it's already been rendered and it blits it to a render target, and then it blits that render target back onto the screen, zoomed in and panned. That's all it does, and then it renders a cursor on top of it in place of the regular KDE cursor. And that's probably why I have the cursor bug on Wayland, but I don't know. I'd have to look in the code. But what I do know is because of the way that it renders, it is impossible for partial repaints in the current state of Kwin to be able to account for how zoomed in I am and where my zoom is focused. So it's most likely just not caring at all and just repainting the left monitor, because as far as it's aware, the only things happening are on my left monitor. It doesn't matter that things are happening on my right monitor to me. To Kwin, it's only on the left.
I see. I guess that would make sense.
And what we've also noticed is typically when you're typing, it will actually catch up after like a second or so. But with the right-click menu example, the reason I was able to get the screenshot of it, wasn't a screenshot, it was a photo. But the reason I was able to get those photos is because the only thing that would cause a full repaint of that area of the screen would be me moving my mouse, or, funnily enough, time. Like, the minute in the digital clock on my panel increasing by 1 would get it to repaint.
Well, yeah, because that would need to repaint so I could see the new number.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's weird. If what I also noticed, and I didn't put this in the bug report yet, but if I have a full screen YouTube video playing on my right monitor and I'm zoomed in doing stuff on my left, none of the issues happen. Because the YouTube video is constantly causing a repaint on the right monitor.
Well, here's what you can do. Put a clock that has milliseconds on it on your screen at all times. Boom. Problem solved.
I might have to do that, but depending on how the clock's implemented, it might only do a partial repaint on that screen. Right,
okay, that's fair. Just always have a YouTube video on in the background, just mute it.
Yeah, that could work. It's a lot of bandwidth, but...
It is. Well, actually, wait, speaking of YouTube videos, I don't know if this is... Actually got shared in the Discord, didn't it? I don't know if you saw it. There is someone who has uploaded... I just can't find it. Okay, maybe it's in my history. Has uploaded Arch Linux, the Arch Linux ISO onto YouTube as video data. Just turn the ISO into raw video data.
I'm not surprised. Someone did, I think, try to turn... what was it? That they did something with, like, image data or something, like, on the internet. or no, it wasn't image data. It was like they were using ICMP ping packets and stuff like that as a way to store data just on the internet. And they wrote a Linux block device driver for it.
If you click on the link, make sure your audio is muted because the ISO is also audio data.
Oh my god.
It will not sound pleasant.
That's probably something my ears could handle, but I can already see by the thumbnail. Oh my god. Why am I not surprised that people do this stuff?
It's awesome. I might have to talk. I think the guy has like a video explaining how he did it, but I might have to talk about it myself because it is really, really cool and really, really stupid.
Now I wonder if you were to do the same thing, but then, was it Matt KC or was it someone else who made a video to ASCII converter that would like turn the pixel data into? It wasn't ASCII, it was NZ escape sequences for your terminal, so like multicolor and stuff. What if you did that with the Arch ISO?
You could, or here's an idea, right? Let the ISO be an ISO.
That too, I mean, yeah, Arch is a great operating system if you leave it as an operating system.
So with this repaint issue, it has been confirmed. Do you like know if there's anything being done with it so far? Like, has anyone actually properly taken a look at like a fix for it?
I know Xavier Hugel has talked a little bit with me about how it could be fixed, and an immediate workaround would be when you're zoomed in, just do full repaints. Because realistically, if you're zoomed in, it's not going to matter anyway.
Yeah.
But as far as people actually working on it, I don't know. I've done a cursory look into the code to see what's going on, but I just don't have the skill set to be able to rewrite whatever needs to be rewritten to make that work. And even the fixing panning on Kwin for multi-monitor on Plasma 6, that was like weeks of work for me because I needed help getting around Kwin. And for me, Kwin is not something I can navigate on my own because with my IDE, I use Rider, but if I do use CLion, which is the C/C++ version of Rider, it just does not play nice with KDE projects. And I don't get code completions, I don't get navigation, I don't get any kind of like analysis whatsoever that I can use. I can't even control click a function to go see where it's implemented, so I have to navigate as if I'm writing code in Notepad, and it's not fun. And compiling Kwin, especially the first time around, it eats so much of my RAM and swap that the linker will segfault almost all the time. It is mental to get it working. And then once you do get it working, you have to submit a merge request and get it code reviewed. And then because I'm not too familiar with KDE's coding style, there was weeks of back and forth of how could we do this a different way that isn't janky as hell. Eventually we got there with multi-head fix, but I don't think that's something that I can do on my own with, you know, partial repaints working, because I don't know how that system works.
Have you looked at the comments under the other bug report, the caching one? Because Nate Graham said the funny thing that you are annoyed that people keep bringing up.
I haven't seen the Bugzilla on that one since I saw your video on it.
Yeah, it didn't have any comments until my video came out, by the looks of it.
Yeah, I haven't checked the Bugzilla since then. I wonder what he said.
This is probably an issue we should fix for the benefit of people with a single slow storage disk. But I have to ask, if you're a technical expert and have multiple options for storage hardware options, would it not make more sense to put the cache on your fastest one rather than a known slow one?
Yeah, yesn't. So I get where he's coming from. Well, because
in my case, I have my boot drive on my fastest drive because that's what makes sense to have. Like, it's your fastest drive.
Yeah, that makes sense. And To be clear, I do...
Or boot and
I do
application
think-
drive, I guess.
Yeah. I do think Kwin shouldn't be writing to the home directory for that. They should be writing to /tmp. Because, I don't know how others have fared with doing that, but in my case, when I was investigating it, I could just delete my .cache folder, and Kwin wouldn't crash. I wouldn't get any errors. I'd just be able to use the effects, and the stutters would take less time. And then eventually they would take more time, the bigger the cache got, but it would just recreate the cache. So there's no reason it can't be on a temp file system. And when people say, well, Ritchie, just put your stuff on a faster hard drive, or on a faster drive, what they fail to realize is, like Nate Graham said, yeah, there are people who don't have SSDs or NVMe. There's the first gen Steam Deck, which one of the variants had eMMC. That's going to be dog slow.
I forgot about that.
And then there's people who have their home directories on a network attached storage device, like you said in the video. That's very much a possibility. And not only that, but in my case, I actually did have it on something faster than a hard drive. I used LVM, which is logical volume management. It's kind of the kernel's kind of own version of RAID, in a way, where you can take multiple disks and pool them together and treat them as one. So in my case, I have 2 4TB hard drives, and then a 1TB PCI 4 NVMe. And what I was doing was I had one of the 4TB drives in an LVM pool, and I was going to add the other one later on once I got my data on it off of Windows. But in front of that, I had a 1TB NVMe cache in front of it. So it should not have been that slow, but my mistake was that my LVM cache pool was full because I was transferring data off of Windows, and I should have flushed it. But there are people who do that. LVM there is a reason that the Arch Wiki literally uses your home directory as an example of how to set up LVM, because that's a valid use case for LVM. It is reasonable to have people pool spinning hard drives together and optionally put an SSD cache in front of it. That's a thing you are able to do. And I don't think that there's any reason why my compositor should hang for several seconds because I did that.
Well, that's the other big question. I don't know why it's hanging. It's one thing that it's pulling in the data. I don't know why it's hanging because of it. That's the weird part.
And someone's obviously going to have to look into it. But my theory, just based on being a game dev and seeing similar things happening in Socially Distant, obviously a game engine and a Wayland compositor are going to have a lot of parallels. They're doing a lot of the same things with rendering and stuff like that. You're going to have a render loop. You're going to have a main thread. And if you block that main thread, you're going to cause those hangs. It's just, that's how it is. And I suspect what's happening is maybe they are loading from the disk on another thread, but they're waiting for that data to come in on the main thread because they have to. And while waiting, they're just not doing anything productive.
Sure.
They're not rendering frames. They're just waiting. And whether it be because they are blocking, waiting for the disk data to come in, or they just are spinning the thread because the data hasn't come in yet and they expect it to come in relatively quickly, who can say? But the point is, at the very least, it should still be pumping out frames. It should still let you move your mouse and type on the keyboard, and it should be reading keyboard input and stuff like that to be able to... Maybe the tiling editor does take 5 seconds to come up, but it actually comes up.
Right. Well, yeah, the issue that bothered me the most is I would open up the tiling editor and it wouldn't open. But I think what I mentioned this in my video. I think what was actually happening is it opened, but it read a second key press, and pressing the key to open it is also the key to close it. So it seems like during that issue where it locked up, it must have rendered it and then like removed it afterwards. It's hard to say because I don't have like specific, action by action logs, but that's the most logical thing I can think of.
And you're absolutely right. That's exactly what it is doing. I actually told you that's what it was doing, and Xavier Hugel told me that's what it was doing, and we confirmed it.
Okay, did confirm it? I didn't know he actually confirmed that. I thought it was just a theory.
Yeah. It does do... If you hold down the tiling editor key right now, it will open, and then it will close, and then it'll come back. Sometimes. It's being temperamental on my system. But, you know, if you hold the key down for a second or so, it will close it. And what's happening is it's not reading 2 key presses. What's actually happening is you press it, then Kwin hangs, and by the time it comes back up, it just hasn't registered that you've let go of it, and it thinks it's still held down, so it goes and immediately closes it, because to it, you've held it down for that long. And unfortunately, that's a very common bug in game development when you're doing streaming and disk I/O. If you block the main thread, all of your delta time calculations they're going to be thrown off by that, because to the game engine it's going to go, oh, the last frame took 5 seconds to render.
Right.
And it causes weird issues with like that with keyboard input, and unfortunately it's what's happening. It's the reality of it. Unfortunately, I don't know what they'll need to do to fix it. If it were a game, I would just say split the load operation across multiple frames and keep rendering frames, but I don't know enough about how it works to say definitively how they'll fix it.
Yeah,
I hope they do.
I don't know if... Yeah, that seems like it's going to be a lot more of an issue to fix. I think the best thing they can probably do is just get QML onto RAM. Stick it in temp. It shouldn't be getting dumped. Like, the folder in cache that it's specifically using is called QML cache. Like, they have a specific folder just for QML. That folder should probably be in your temp.
Yeah. And I get why they're caching it, because when you're doing QML or really any markup language, ultimately you're gonna need to parse it, and then you're gonna need to turn it into something that's renderable. And it's a good idea to cache that result so you don't have to do that computation every time. But it shouldn't be cached to the disk.
It seems like they're still doing the computation every time, though. That's what's weird to me. Like, every time you do the effect, it's being reloaded, and so it seems to me like they're doing that computation every time. So I don't know. I don't know what the logic is behind caching it to the disk anyway, if you're not going to be reusing it.
I don't know either, and I honestly don't know enough about the code to really understand why. I need to look at it and then understand what the code's doing.
The fix that you suggested with putting the whole Kwin folder on TempFS, the only reason I wouldn't directly recommend that is I don't know what else Kwin is putting in like the whole Kwin folder, and I don't know if there's possibly something in there you'd want to survive between boots, because I've noticed that by moving my entire cache folder, apparently ZSH doesn't like its history file existing on a symlink, so my ZSH history broke.
In cache?
Yeah, that's where I've had it for a long time. I've moved it to my directly to my home directory. But ZSH has like a variable that lets you set location. That's the only thing I've seen break because of it. Everything else, to the best of my knowledge, is fine. I thought that maybe browsers did a bit of caching there, but they seem to do their caching a bit differently. So that seems to have been fine. Like, I initially deleted my entire cache folder just to see what would happen, and nothing broke. Like, I did it when Kwin was running, so nothing broke, which is good. But I haven't extensively tested everything that uses the Kwin folder to say whether or not you'd want that to be going through boots. You were saying that it's been fine, but yeah, I don't know if it's always going to be fine for every situation, though.
Yeah. The only weird thing that I've had with my system since then is, for whatever reason, and it's probably Unity Editor being Unity Editor. The other day, I had this weird issue where I would open Unity, and Unity lets you select what IDE to use to edit scripts in, and if you don't select it, it's just gonna use your default text editor, and you don't want that. You don't want to do Unity in Kate. It's not fun. So I select Rider, because, well, Rider works a lot better with Unity, and I like Rider.
Yeah.
And what would end up happening is it would apply, and I'd be able to open scripts in Rider and have everything work. But then I'd restart Unity, which you have to do a lot. Sometimes it just decides it wants to break, and you have to restart it. And it wouldn't save my settings. And I don't know what fixed it, but it's fixed now. I haven't done anything to fix it. The only thing I've done is reboot my system. I doubt that's what did it. It probably is, but who knows? But that is so far the only weird thing that I've had happen since moving my cache off of the hard drive.
Do you have it set up with a TempFS right now, or do you have the folder moved?
Right now, I have my... I actually completely redid my home directory. So I have the main home directory on my 1TB NVMe. So all my pictures, my videos are on that. And then I have a vault folder that's my 4TB hard drive. So maybe in my case, the reason nothing weird has happened is because I'm doing something a little more sane. On second thought, that's probably what it is. But when I was initially doing it, I was just sim-linking it onto a faster drive. And then when I was testing to reproduce the bug, I was doing the opposite and sim-linking it onto a slower drive. And that's how I ended up noticing that it was based on the drive's busyness, as opposed to solely the fact that it was a hard drive. Because when I did that, when I was testing to reproduce it, I would put the cache on the slower drive, and the effects would still be fairly responsive. But then I'd start writing to that drive, and it would chug.
Right.
Like, really badly. So, I suspect that's why I was having a lot more problems with it with LVM, because my LVM cache was full. And every time Kwin went to write to that .cache folder, it would have to write to the LVM cache, and then it would also have to write to the main hard drive on it. And if it went to write to the LVM cache, it had to make space to write to it, which means moving something else off of the LVM cache onto the spinning drive, and that's going to slow things down.
Right.
So I had a pretty complicated setup. Now I'm a lot more sane, and I'm not thrilled with the way my system's set up. I don't want to have a specific vault folder for my 4TB hard drive. I want my home directory to be all of those drives, but it is what it is.
Yeah, when I eventually change out my home drive, I'm just gonna probably NVMe it. Like, that'll just be the easiest thing. I don't like here's the thing, right? I haven't noticed any. The only issue I've noticed with like having my home directory be a hard drive is specifically KDE. Like, I've never experienced this problem using GNOME, using Hyperland, using anything on X11 like i3 Awesome, anything like that. I doubt the problem's there on Cosmic. This is specifically an issue with the way that QTQML works. This is just QML. Look, if I'm being honest, it's just QML frankly doing things wrong.
I would be inclined to believe you there. It really should not be caching to disk.
Well,
especially if it's going to be recomputed every time. What are you doing?
Even if it's not a speed issue, like, the issue is there's no reason to constantly be smacking the drive. Like, why? Yeah. Why are you constantly hitting it with I/O every time you need to do a desktop effect? Like, that's just unnecessary reads and writes.
Yeah. And with SSDs, maybe nowadays it's not such a big problem, but SSDs have limited write cycles. And even with wear leveling, you hit it too many times, and eventually it's going to say, fuck you, and die. Like, it's going to happen. It's inevitable. It's only a matter of when.
And like if KDE wants to do a simple fix, like the easiest fix is like they don't even have to like get anything changed with QTQML. I think the easiest fix is just anytime you're doing any QML stuff, just chuck it on TempFS. You might have to worry about like I guess you could have the issue where you might have to clear out some of what's been loaded, and maybe it will take a bit more effort, but I don't think it's going to require like a complete re-architecting of how this system works. I could be wrong, and if someone from KDE is watching this and can like correct me there, let me know, but it doesn't seem like the most straightforward fix would be that difficult to do.
Here's hoping.
For me, this is the only problem that like have with KDE where it's genuinely made me want to swap to a different desktop. Like there are issues with like, you know, I don't like the way that their virtual monitors work and other little things, but this has been the only problem where it's genuinely made me want to stop using KDE. And honestly, during that stream I did on KDE, it made me want to just stop using KDE right there.
Yeah, and I remember that. I think I was actually there. And I don't remember having the same issues as severe as you did, but I do remember having issues of my own, like the Helly screens bug and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And at the time, I actually was having the stuttering issue. I just didn't realize that it was an issue with KDE. I thought, like a lot of people in my comments section, I thought that it was my fault. Like, I didn't think it was related to my home directory. I thought that it was driver related with my GPU.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's what, when I talked to David Edmondson, he was like, this is probably some like GPU frame timing issue. Like that.
Yeah, and David Hugel thought the same thing, and only when I moved the .cache folder off of the NVMe and some other stuff that I tried, did I realize this is disk related. What the hell's going on?
Yeah.
And like I can play games like Cyberpunk 2077, which are notorious hard on resources to play off a hard drive, and it's fine.
I like my games being on an SSD because I particularly don't like load times.
Me, it depends. Load times don't really bother me. Realistically, it's gonna take less time for the game to load than it is for my eyes to tell that it's loading anyway.
Sure. Well, I got the main reason I really don't like hard drives for loading games is I played Skyrim on a PS3, and there were situations where you would go into a building and it would be like 30-second to a minute load time. Every single time.
I actually had to replace the hard drive in my PS3 with an SSD a couple of years ago because I was doing a lot of Little Big Planet stuff, and I was creating levels in it, and Little Big Planet has an undo redo thing. And, you know, sometimes you make mistakes, you'll hit the little left D-pad button and it undoes your last action. And when it does that, it has to reload the old state of the level from disk. And I was constantly getting 15-second rewind times doing undo redo, and upgrading to an SSD just fixed it. It was weird, but then it also makes sense because this PS3 has been kicking since 2007. It's one of the original models. It's like the very first that didn't have PS2 compatibility built in.
Oh, I was gonna ask that. You said one of the original. I thought you were gonna say it did actually have that. Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
it can do the it used to be able to do other OS, so it is early enough to have that firmware. But it didn't have the PS2 compatibility. What it does have is it has the ability to emulate PS2. Not even through PS2 Classics emulator. I can just give it an ISO because I have it custom firmware, and it will read it as a disk and play it. But it's not doing hardware emulation. It's doing software. But the SSD made Little Big Planet like literally 10 times faster for me, and I suspect that 160 gig drive was dying, but
Right.
then my dad put it in his computer and it works fine. I don't know why he put it in his computer, but he did.
Oh, hey, if it works, I guess.
I think he stores his music on it. I don't know why, but you do you, I guess.
Oh, that's sure. Why not? So, I guess we probably should talk a little bit about what's going on with socially distant, like where what the state of the game is now. Like, what's happened since last time?
Since last time, a few devlogs have come out. The most recent one was me working on. Can't remember. No, it wasn't Hat. It was. Oh, what was it that I was doing the last time? I think I was still doing foundational stuff at that point, but I multi-threaded the terminal. So traditionally, the in-game terminal emulator, it's based off ST. It's a port from ST or STC, like the C version of the suckless terminal, to C# and Unity. And I had to multi-thread it because if I printed like a lot of text to it, the game would have to process all of that text to get it rendered on screen. And that takes time. And it was taking enough time that it would drop the frame rate. And multi-threading it allowed me to process keyboard input and stuff like that on the main thread and just send the resulting events over to the terminal thread. And it just processes text when it wants to process text. And so I can print thousands of characters to it now, and it does not chug the frame rate. It just renders and repaints the terminal when it's ready. So that's something that I did. I also added background blur to it for all the people out there who like their background blurred terminals. That's now a thing you can do. It's on by default, but there's an accessibility toggle to turn it off. I did work a lot on the networking simulation for hacking. And, I won't go into that because it's very complicated, and realistically, as a player, you're not going to notice most of what's going on behind the scenes, so it's not worth it to go into it. But lately, this month, I'm not going to reveal too much because I want to save a lot of it for the devlog, but I am very far into a lot of the NPC-related dialogue stuff.
I don't know if we had this conversation last time, but the font you're using is JetBrains Mono, isn't it?
Terminal uses JetBrains Mono.
Okay,
I don't know if that's going to be in the final game because I don't know about the licensing yet.
Yeah.
But the main user interface nowadays uses a different font that I unfortunately cannot pronounce due to a speech impediment. But
can you write it in Discord? Let's see if I can pronounce it because my speech isn't.
Type it. But it is the Cyberpunk 2077 font.
No, we're not doing that. Nope, not happening.
Yeah. I can barely type it, but I like that font.
Rajdhani? Maybe?
Maybe. It's a Google font though, and it is open font license, so I should be in the clear for it. And I originally chose it because it is the UI font used in Cyberpunk 2077, and that's sort of the art style I'm going for with the UI. And some people have recognized this as that font, but other people just think it looks nice, and that's really motivating for me. So it's used everywhere.
Yep. I know this font. Okay. I have a feeling the license isn't going to be fine for using JetBrains Mono, but have you thought of what you might want to use in the terminal instead?
Honestly, I don't know. There aren't a lot of great-looking monospace fonts for a hacking game. Right. There are a lot of great monospace fonts, to be clear, but a lot of them are... use them for your code editor or for your actual terminal. They don't look flashy in a hacking game.
Right.
A lot of them look pretty similar, and a lot of them, what I've noticed, particularly on Google fonts, they miss italic variants, which is important because maybe not in an actual terminal, you might not see italic fonts used a lot, but in a hacking game, you kind of have to give it that kind of Hollywood hacker aesthetic, and that means I want to have access to different font styles and be able to do italics and underline and stuff like that. And that's why I ported ST, because I can do all of those color codes and stuff like that and be able to do fancy effects. But I think if I do need to change the font, which I'm not totally clear about, I'm going to have to check. But if I do, I'm probably going to either go Ubuntu Mono, which is also OFL, I believe, or I'm going to go with Hack, which is the one that's used in KDE. And the reason I'm going for either one of those is because I personally think they look nice, and the game now has Bloom, which definitely helps make the font look a lot more flashy. So, I'm not going to change it yet because there's no reason to. It works fine as JetBrains Mono, and realistically, it's probably OFL. I don't think JetBrains would use any other license. You can just download it for free. So realistically, I'm fine. But yeah, as far as other gameplay stuff I'm doing in Socially Distant, this isn't something that's going to come in the next devlog because I need to actually implement it, and I'm running out of time to do so. But I have this idea for mechanic, where you download an image from the in-game internet, or something like that, and you're going to open it in an image viewer, and when you zoom into it, you're going to be able to pick out certain pieces of information that are in the image. Like, maybe you have a screenshot of someone's browser, and
it's like a point-and-click style thing.
Kinda. And you have a screenshot of someone's browser, and maybe you're looking for someone who has a private social profile that they're following, and you want to hack into that private profile. Well, first, you're not going to be able to password crack it, because that's going to take a while, and you might get locked out, but you might be able to hack into someone who has a public profile, or social engineer them, or something like that. But to do that, you need to know someone who's following that private profile. So my idea is to have an NPC post some kind of screenshot of their computer, and then you'll be able to pick out those elements that are on their screen, and be able to find usernames and other information in the image, and be able to catalog it. Kind of like OCR, but in a gamified way. Orwell, I don't know if you've played that, or if other people have that are listening, but Orwell has a similar mechanic, and it's what the game itself is basically built around. Is you're browsing the internet and you're trying to find information about like criminals and stuff like that, and this whole conspiracy that's going on in the game, and you will come across these highlighted pieces of information on the internet of people saying things, certain statements and stuff like that, and you have to you drag them out into this catalog, and you end up building this network of information and people and relationships and stuff like that. And what you drag in ultimately gets reported to the government, and it decides how the game plays out. It's really interesting of a mechanic, so I figured I'd do something pretty similar of Socially Distant that I haven't really seen in a lot of hacking games. So that's a mechanic that I'm going to try. It's going to be quite ironic for the blind guy to be implementing an image-based mechanic, but we'll see how it goes.
Well, hey, at least we can be sure there's probably going to be a zoom feature in the game.
There won't be. I'm going to rely on the desktop to do it.
Okay, that's fair.
The reason I'm making that decision is because it's similar to using a virtual machine with a zoom feature. If I'm in Microsoft Windows in a virtual machine, and I hit the Windows key and plus, it's going to open the Windows magnifier, but it's also going to zoom into KDE, which is a problem. And
right.
I don't want to conflict with that in the game.
Okay, that's fair.
It's not going to do that.
That's fair. But at least if an issue comes up where the zoom maybe conflicts with it, and there's some sort of issue that happens because of it, that problem should get fixed.
Yeah.
Hopefully, you come across the problem yourself before anyone else actually sees it.
Yeah, realistically, most of the accessibility features in the game come from, okay, this looks cool, but I can barely read it, so I'm going to implement a toggle that lets me dim the colors or change the font and stuff like that, and it's been working pretty well.
Do you have
There's
some
a
sort
feature
of...
right...
Oh, go on.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, do you have some sort of like high contrast theme in there as well, or is that just how it looks?
I don't have a high contrast theme yet.
Mm-hmm.
Probably won't, because doing a theming system in Unity is hell. I've done it before. It's not fun. But something I do have is the game's dialogue system.
Mm-hmm.
You can go in, and normally the chat bubbles for NPCs are colored, and the background is quite bright, as it would be in real life.
Mm-hmm.
But you can actually dim the colors quite a lot, to the point where it almost becomes a muted, almost black, even for the player, which would be blue.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes it a lot more readable. And I think I've taken a few screenshots with it turned on.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually kind of looks neat, despite it being an accessibility feature, which is more than I can say about Windows High Contrast.
Yeah, we talked about that one last time.
Yeah. I remember that, and it's so much worse than Windows 11, let me tell you. I didn't know that at the time, but it's so much worse over there.
Mm-hmm. Was it... I don't remember if it was you or somebody else who was having a discussion with a GNOME person about high contrast themes.
I definitely was having a conversation.
Yeah, it was you. Okay.
The evil skeleton about it.
Yeah. Okay, yep.
Yeah. He and I have become friends since us both doing the podcast. He's a pretty close friend of mine. I really like him. And... Or them. I accidentally... They did come out a few days ago, so... Oops. But they are really cool. And I actually helped them, by giving them feedback, redesign their website and add a high contrast theme to it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to access that theme, unfortunately, but it is there, and it looks pretty damn nice.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't do any of the mortal sins that Windows High Contrast does, which is even better.
I know there was that discussion, but maybe I'm thinking of someone else that actually had a conversation about like the actual GNOME desktop.
Yeah, that was probably someone else, but I know that I have had discussions with Skelly about it and how it looks kind of bad.
Yeah, I don't... Do they even have a high contrast theme right now? I'm not certain. Because I know GNOME's not big... The problem is GNOME's not big on theming, so... If they
I know they do have one, because I have turned it on in the past. It's not a great one, but it is there.
It's... it compared to Windows, what would you rate higher?
I would rate GNOME.
Okay, which is not a high bar, to be fair.
Yeah. The problem with Windows is it just takes all of the color out of it. And that makes sense if you're blind and see color, but it's not see color. You're really going to see this.
Oh, your audio is completely dying.
Oh, God.
Try say something now. You're just a robot. Could you leave the call and just rejoin?
Try.
I will leave as well. Hello.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Considerably better. You don't sound like a robot now.
Okay. Where was I?
Something about high contrast.
Windows. Yeah, I remember now. Windows High Contrast takes all of the color out of things. And going between Windows applications, the window borders look completely different. Like, the terminal looks different from the File Explorer, looks different from UWP apps, look different from Win32 apps, and it's a mess. And there's also the distinct lack of color. You get, like... There's a dominant accent color in all of the high contrast themes, and you can set it, but you're very limited in what you can set in those themes. And the big problem is, if you're blind enough to not see color, then I'd wager you're blind enough to need a screen reader. But if you're at my level of blindness, you do need text-to-speech for some things. But what's more important is a lot of visual context clues beyond just reading. That comes down to color and spacing and cursors doing what you expect them to do. Like if I hover over a link, it should be a pointing finger. But with Windows, one of the worst things that it does is, especially on my website and even Skelly's, you go to a code snippet and it may be syntax highlighted, but you're not going to see it. Right. It's going to be all white.
So what you would want is more like a gradient of like high contrast, where it's like, you know, removes all color, removes this, removes that, and you can like choose where along that line you want it to be, or maybe enable certain things to be disable certain things, I guess.
Yeah. I like, for me, I don't want a lot of thick white borders to differentiate between different panels. That just isn't aesthetically pleasing, and it isn't helpful.
Right.
What I want is for contrast ratios to be increased. Like, instead of a gray-dark theme where the text is light gray and the background is dark gray, I'd want white text and black text, or a black background. Or maybe I want colors more saturated, because a more saturated red is easier for me to distinguish than a yellow. And what Windows does nowadays is it takes a lot of those colors and heavily brightens them. It doesn't saturate them, it brightens them. So you'll end up with, and on GitHub, there's like the danger zone section in a repository settings, and a lot of those buttons are bright red because they're danger zone items. They're things like delete the repository or transfer ownership, stuff like that you don't typically want to do by accident. And when I'm in high contrast, they are red, but they're bright yellow red, and it's hard to distinguish against the other colors for me.
Right.
And I'd rather it just be, maybe mess with the background a bit and increase contrast ratios, but don't mess with the actual colors. And then the other big offense for me in Windows High Contrast is on my website. A lot of the links on it are animated so that when you hover over them, they fade to white or they fade to blue from white. And I did that because I want it to be indicating that the page is responsive. But in Windows, it strips all that out. And they all go blue. And they stay blue.
Right. So it's kind of like the way they've handled high contrast is they have one set definition of, if you need high contrast, this is what you need. It's kind of like, if you remember a lot of old video games that would have a colorblind mode, but it wouldn't be different kinds of colorblind, it would just be colorblind.
Yeah, it would be colorblind. You can't see colors? Okay, we'll put shapes.
Well, I remember in Battlefield 3 it had a colorblind option, and I think it was red-blue colorblind. So it would make, like, the team icons, you know, different. But if you had a different kind of colorblind, it didn't help you, really. Maybe it made it better, maybe it made it worse, but it's certainly not what you need for, like, your system.
Yeah. Whereas what I do right now is I use Breeze on KDE, most people, but I have a custom color scheme on it. It's not one that I made, and I think someone on Mastodon offered to make one for me that does what I needed to do. But it's one I just downloaded from the KDE store. I forget what it's called. It's a weird name. But it makes a lot of the UI elements black background, white text, or a bright cyan, as I guess they were going for the hacker effect as well. It's not perfect. But what it definitely helps, because I don't do well with grays as my background, and I do even worse with off-whites as my text. What I really want is something like the Discord AMOLED theme. That would be the perfect high contrast theme for me. If I could have that, or even a traditional high contrast black, but without the thick white borders and taking all the colors out and all of that context out, it would be great.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, traditional high contrast games are just not that.
Mm-hmm. Well, we could probably keep going for like another hour, I reckon, but we have passed the 2-hour mark, so I think it's probably a good time to end it off.
Yeah, and it's getting late for me too.
Well, I wanna
have no
pop
idea
down to
when
the
that's-
gym and get some videos done after that. So,
Yeah.
let the people know where they can find you and find your stuff.
Well, last time I didn't mention it too much, but there's obviously the YouTube channel. I've been getting back into making videos.
Mhm.
I have my Stream Deck working now, which is great. So youtube.com/acidiclight. I can't remember if there's an underscore or not, but
Not on
sure.
YouTube, no. There is a space on your name, but there's no underscore in the actual @
All right. Well, I can always send those links to you, and you can link them in the description.
Mm-hmm.
There's always that, and then I'm on Mastodon. I'm very active on there. That's like my only social media.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to support what I do, socially distant mainly right now, but I have other projects on the table. There's the Patreon where you get access to socially distant devlogs a week earlier than everyone else, which is the only perk you get right now, besides like a private chat where you can talk to me on Discord. But it does help out a lot to have that support, and it means a lot to me. And obviously there's the website, a little less active on there, but occasionally I do programming blogs. And then that's the only other thing I would say is socially distant is doing playtest applications now. I haven't started bringing people onto the playtest program because I'm not ready to, but I am accepting applications. So if anyone wants to actually try the game out and find bugs in it or accessibility issues and stuff like that, that would be awesome too, and it would mean a lot, and I'd be happy to meet you guys.
Do you have a link that I can send people to that I can just put in the description, or?
There is sociallydistantgame.com/playtest, or on the main website it'll be in the top corner in the nav bar, it'll say apply to playtest.
I see the button. Yes, right here. Sweet. I will
just ignore the padding issue between the button and the social media. I don't know how to fix that.
Yeah. I also noticed if I'm zoomed in too much on like the browser, it switches to a hamburger menu, and the hamburger menu doesn't do anything.
Yeah, it's implemented, but it's broken because I'm not great with CSS.
That's fair. That's fair.
Eventually, I'll fix that when I'm not doing other things.
Fair enough. Is that pretty much it?
Yeah.
Awesome. So, as for me, my main channel is Brody Robertson. I do Linux videos there 6-ish days a week. I have no idea what to be out because I have a giant backlog and I need to stop recording podcasts and take some time off, but I don't. So, check it out, see what's there. If you want to check out my gaming stuff, that is Brody on Games. I stream on Twitch and YouTube twice a week. Right now, I'm playing through Sekiro and probably still doing my Pokemon stream with Ren. That's starting this week as of the recording, so we'll probably be like 3 or 4 episodes into that. We're playing a randomized black and white Nuzlocke, so check that out. If you want to listen to the audio version of this and you're watching the video, you can find the audio on pretty much any podcast platform. There is an RSS feed. Put it in your favorite app. And if you want to find the video, it is on YouTube at Tech Over Tea. Give me the final word. What do you want to say?
You don't out Ritchie the Ritchie. That's what every bug sooner or later finds out.
What was that comment that someone said on your Discord? You don't... Is it about Neil Gompa? Where is it?
You gotta stompa the Gompa.
You gotta stompa the Gompa.
Yeah, that was one of them. That was because when I was announcing to Patreon that I did that we were doing this podcast, it was I gave myself the goal of out-passioning Neil Gompa because he was really passionate in it, and I hope that I did that.
It was a good episode. I definitely had some fun here. And I'm sure there'll be a lot more to talk about for another one at some point in the future. Hopefully, Socially Distant is a lot further along then, and the playtest goes well.
Yeah.
Well, I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.